All right, well, welcome to this educational technology course. My name is Greg Sherman and I am the course designer as well as the instructor for this particular class. I've been in this role at one university or another, or with one type of student or another, since 1994. That is a long time to be teaching educational technology, and I can assure you the technology has regularly evolved since that time.
I got a Kindle. I'm very excited about it. I downloaded a 500-page book in 10 seconds, which blew me away. I mean, compared to the delivery system I grew up with, the Scholastic Book Club, it took me 10 days to get my mom to write out a check. 10 business days, that was her policy. And you would bring in the check the last Friday in September. They delivered the book senior year of high school. I got my diploma and Hop on Pop on the same day, and I feel my verbal suffered.
Since 1994. That is a long time to be teaching educational technology, and I can assure you the technology has regularly evolved since that time. However, the way that teachers could and perhaps should be using technology actually hasn't changed much at all. And I'll give you one quick example. This is before 1994, because before then I was a science teacher, I taught ninth grade biology primarily. So I had all of the really good students who were going to take lab sciences every year in high school. And so it was a really good gig, and I had that for nearly 10 years. I took a break to go back to school in the middle of that, slightly, but not much. So back then, though, so sometime in the late 80s, I had a computer hooked into my classroom. It was actually networked into a telephone line. And the only thing that I knew how to use on it, and the reason why it was in my classroom, is that it had this service called SciNet. And SciNet, it may kind of sound familiar, at least in function to you. What you could do with SciNet is you could sit down and you could type out a question, a science-related question, and you press enter, and that question would go out, and it would go onto the bulletin boards of practicing scientists, mostly at universities, because back then that's where most of the network computers were. If it wasn't in defense or some other major group, it was there. And this was a group of university scientists, and so anybody could ask a question, and then they would read it on the bulletin board, and then different scientists from different locations would answer that question. It wasn't an immediate response. It took sometimes upwards of a week to get a full range of answers to the question, or possible answers to the question. But I made sure that my students used it if they had a question that I couldn't answer, and a question that I didn't want to answer. Or I would encourage them to ask divergent questions, where they would ask things that didn't necessarily have a right or wrong answer, but they were looking for scientific input on something. And so in a way, what we did back then, many years ago, more than 30 years ago, right? That was kind of like the way you would use an artificial intelligence chat now. It just wasn't as quick. And instead of taking information from sources all over the world, you were getting information from individual scientists. So it was a similar kind of technology, just it wasn't immediate, and it relied on sort of, you could say, fewer sources, but likely some very robust and reliable sources if they were scientists who were part of this group. So it wasn't artificial intelligence back then. It was, I suppose it was real intelligence, RI. But how I would choose to use that as a teacher in some ways isn't any different as to how I would choose to use AI today if I was still teaching a science class. So I've been around a long time, and the fundamental principles of this class are things that I've worked out, researched, implemented over many, many years, and I can assure you that you will benefit from the overall structure and focus of this particular class. So let me say a few words about the overall purpose of this class. There's 4 specific areas that this class is going to explore and that you're going to explore within this class. And these areas, I think, again, are going to help to make you a more effective professional educator, whether you're a practicing educator now or whether you're in pre-service education and you're just now studying to be a professional educator. In any case, these 4 areas will be very beneficial for you. The first area is that this class and all of its strategies are really designed to help reinforce what it means to be a good teacher. So that's really important. So good teaching. Not just instruction, but that's its core. So that's the first area. The second area is actually related to technology, and that's how can technology be used to help make you a better teacher. So the first purpose is just to look at what are the characteristics of effective teaching. The second area or purpose is to look at how can technology support those efforts. And the third purpose is for you to create different things every week. And that act of creation constitutes a really important context for learning and applying the skills that I want you to learn. In fact, I have a graphic on one of the early project pages that I just recently asked AI to help me with. And I did it in order to underscore how important the creativity was to this class. And so I asked AI to create an image that showed a younger artist who had a palette of colorful paints to be painting on a computer screen. And so it sort of emphasizes the artistic nature of using the computer. I also asked it to do it in an oil paint style, just because I thought that would be a cool way or a cool look on the screen. And I kind of think it turned out okay. So I'm going to use that this semester anyway. And the fourth overall purpose of this class is honestly just to introduce you to some of the many different ways that technology can be used to support professional practice in very relevant contexts or scenarios. So this is a nearly 100% project-based class, and I'm asking you to create something every week. And what I'm asking you to create is going to be very relevant to your practice. So that's the overall purpose of this class. So there are 4 really important prerequisites for this class. And to be honest, there are some students who don't succeed in this class, and they don't succeed primarily because it's completely online and it's asynchronous. So there is no set time when you have to be somewhere, but there are many set times when you have to complete things and get them posted or submitted, however. And that all takes independent planning. And so you have to be a really good independent learner to be successful in this class. That would be one of the really important prerequisites for the class.
Look, you've got it all wrong. You don't need to follow me. You don't need to follow anybody. You've got to think for yourself. You're all individuals. Yes, we're all individuals. You're all different. Yes, we are all different.
Another prerequisite is that you really need to be comfortable using technology, because I'm probably going to be introducing you to computer-based tools, something new that you've never messed around with, likely every week or every other week. And sometimes they're not always as user-friendly as other things. Some things are, some things aren't. So you're going to have to get really, you're going to have to be really sort of brave and adventurous as you open up some new experience and try to figure it out. So hopefully that's an area that you're somewhat comfortable in. Another prerequisite is that this class encourages you to do things completely independently and completely alone. I am okay and thrilled if you might work with other students in the class on different projects, or at least bounce ideas off of them. But if that's something that you would feel the need to do, then it's something that you'll have to reach out and arrange for yourself. Because I don't have that capacity this semester anyway to sort of form these relationships and these groups. So you're going to have to do that on your own. One nice thing is that every student in the class is going to be posting their work and making it available for everybody else in the class to view. So if you don't know anybody in the class, after the first week, you'll get to know everybody if you want in the class. And if there's somebody who is, it might be somebody who you relate to and would want to work with on something, you can feel free to reach out to them if you like. So, but working alone is really the focus of this class. And that's good and bad, as you know. And finally, the last prerequisite is just that you have to have some experience in school, either as a student for a long time or as a teacher, because lots of the things I'm asking you to do is going to relate to the experiences and the culture of education in general. So those are the main prerequisites for the class. So this class has 3 audiences. There are pre-service teachers all across the board, from kindergarten all the way through high school. There are students in here who are in service. They're graduate students earning a master's degree in curriculum and instruction. Some of them are pursuing a teaching license, and some already have it. And then there are some students who are studying to be special educators, who will be from kindergarten through 12th grade, and every type of student in between. So those are the 3 different audiences, and I can tell you that the fundamental skills that are facilitated in this class and that are practiced in this class can benefit any of those types of audiences. But as the semester progresses, depending on what kind of student you are, I'm going to ask you to look at a project a different way and to reflect on resources from where you're at, whether you're a master's student, practicing teacher, pre-service teacher, or special ed. And when we get to the end of the class, the projects will be very specific for you. So if you're special ed, I'm going to actually introduce you to a model of sort of instructional planning that's very specific to special educators. So there is going to be things specific to the different types of students, but overall, this is a class designed for any professional educator, whether you have a lot of experience or almost no experience. It's designed for you to practice skills related to the use of technology in teaching. So the course has very specific learning outcomes, but I will tell you there is definitely a hidden curriculum that kind of shapes the entire course. And that hidden curriculum is based on some really important realizations that likely most of you are having lately, and certainly a realization that I've been having lately. And that is that I believe education is really in a state of crisis right now. Actually, I believe a lot of things in this country are in a state of crisis. I also believe that educators can do something about it, and I'll speak to that in a moment. But what's happening in our culture right now is that progressive thinking is being demonized, and what's hard to accept in that as teachers is that education really is synonymous with progress. It's synonymous with continual improvement, with growing as a human being and realizing your full potential as a human. That's progress, you know? And to have that the progress and progressivism demonized right now is really, really disheartening.
What is this?
Okay, sir. This is the White House.
What are we doing at the White House?
What?
Ow! Ow!
It turned out the results of Joe's IQ test had caught the attention of the highest levels of government.
Okay, wait a minute. I'm the smartest guy in the world? Says who?
The IQ test you took in prison. You got the highest score in history. Brought to you by Carl's Jr.
Yeah, dumbass. You're even smarter than President Camacho. That's how come he's making you Secretary of Interior.
Okay, so who are you?
I'm the Secretary of Energy.
I won a contest, got to be a cabinet member. I'm the Secretary of State. Brought to you by Carl's Jr.
Why do you keep saying that?
Because they pay me every time I do. It's a really good way to make money. You're so smart, why don't you know that? Motherfucker. The Secretary of Defense.
Huh?
And fun bags over there is the Attorney General.
And that's Secretary of Education.
It's kind of stupid, but he's President Camacho's stepbrother. Still does a pretty good job, eh?
We certainly see some regressive educational policies. I've seen it my whole career, but it's really getting to sort of a critical. We're at a critical place right now, where we seem to be taking some very major steps backwards in our field. There's definitely an attack right now on academic freedoms, and I say that with all respect. There certainly needs to be accountability in schools, certainly. But when you have people who are elected to school boards who don't have any experience or education in education, and they're making decisions about some important things that affect how a teacher, a professional educator, practices, that can lead to some very demoralizing kind of work situations for teachers, but also it seems to be against progress, against growth. And so again, I believe that we're in crisis, but I also believe that there is a way that we can address this. Now, let me just say a few words about education in crisis, okay? We know that right now there are a lot of leaders in the field of education who are highly underqualified to be in positions of leadership, and yet they are charged with making a lot of important decisions that affect us. Having underqualified, or in some cases completely unqualified leaders is like contributes to the crisis situation. We have professional agencies related to supporting the education that have been seeing massive staff layoffs and kind of thoughtlessly laid off. There's a tax on the affordability of college, of higher education. Certainly there's a role for higher education, whether you look at it as a place for personal growth and intellectual development, or a place for helping people learn a set of skills related to securing some type of job, a professional job later. The reality is nobody in education wants to, is following the charge of just shaping obedient workers. That's not why we go into this profession. We certainly. We have a lot of financial cuts happening in the field of education right now that are affecting vulnerable populations. You have this very, very distinct anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of crusade, and it doesn't make any sense. We have a lot of policies that are in place to try and help address the needs of the neediest, you know, and right now, all of that, for some reason, is really being demonized at all levels of education. But I want you to know this isn't my first rodeo with such regressive educational policies. I started teaching in the mid-'80s. That was smack dab in the middle of the Ronald Reagan era. And I don't know if you know this or not, but Ronald Reagan, he campaigned in 1980. He campaigned on a platform that included eliminating the Department of Education. And again, I don't know enough about the issue to try and figure out why that why removing a priority of education at the federal level was a crusade for the conservative movement. I honestly don't. And I say that with all respect for anybody who across the political spectrum, but then as now, the idea that we want to remove, we want to put education back on the states, let it be their responsibility, let it be a local responsibility. That's what doesn't make sense is that it's already that way for most of anything that happens in education. And so I'll tell you one thing, if you want to move it all to the states, I would love to see us at the national level get rid of sort of these national accountability measures that only look at a narrow range of what is defined as learning. But I will say that back then, in all the years since and now, there is something that we can do as educators to help address what I think is kind of a crisis. And that is, all teachers are ultimately responsible for deciding what they think is important for students to learn, no matter what their job is, no matter what level of teaching they have, what subjects they teach, what grade level. It is their decision making. It's their thought process. It's kind of like they're professionals. Kind of like how if you go to see a doctor, one of the most important things that a doctor does is collect information about you, and they make a decision about what they think is might be wrong with you, and then they also make decisions about what kind of treatment that you're going to that they believe is in your best interest to heal you if you need healing. Well, it's the same thing in education. Teachers are in the same boat. They assess their learners. They make decisions about what they believe their students need to learn, what's important, and at the end of the day, that is the ultimate power in education, and we have it. We have it as teachers. So this class is going to start off emphasizing a lot of thinking more about what is important to be learned, and all of that is very, very relevant to what's going on in the world today. And I believe that if teachers make really good decisions consistently about what they believe is important to be learned, then we can continue to progress as a field, professional field, but also as a society. We can, in spite of all the challenges, in spite of all the roadblocks.
I'm David Perkins. I'm a professor emeritus at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, former director of Project Zero, and still very active in projects trying to make sense of the world of education and make it better. And I have a question for you. Think back to when you were in elementary school or high school. What was worth learning for you? I don't mean just the obvious stuff like basic literacy and basic math, but besides that, what really made a difference? I love that question. I've asked it of many people, and I think that question, what's worth learning, is absolutely fundamental to making sense of the world of education and deciding how best to educate. A lot of the research is about how to learn well, and that's terribly important. But it's not quite the same thing as what's worth learning. Let me give you a favorite example. I love to ask audiences, who studied the quadratic equation? All the hands go up. Everybody studied the quadratic equation. And then I like to ask, who has used a quadratic equation in the last 10 years? And most of the hands go down, but there's still a few. And then I like to ask, okay, who's used a quadratic equation in the last 10 years outside of an educational context? And then almost all the rest of the hands go down. Maybe there's one left. And it's wonderful to ask that person, what did you do with the quadratic equation? And they'll have a little story, and it makes sense. And it's great that at least one person in 100 found something to do with it. Now, when I do this, math teachers get mad at me. They say, oh, you don't like math. You don't think math is meaningful. Actually, my degrees are in mathematics. I love math. I think the quadratic equation is fascinating. But that's just me. In schools, I always think we should have an opportunity for people to learn what's really engaging for them. And I was engaged in a lot of math. But that's not quite the same question as what our general policy and general curriculum is going to be like. So why the quadratic equation? Today, a lot of math educators ask the same question. And if not the quadratic equation, what? Well, what about statistics and probability? Now, it may sound dry, but it doesn't have to be dry because that's a matter of the art of teaching. And statistics and probability come up all the time in your life. They come up in insurance decisions. They come up in looking at various government and school policy. What percentage of this, what percentage of that? They come up in gambling decisions. They come up endlessly. If there's one piece of math that's really empowering and smart to know about, it's some of the fundamentals of statistics and probability. Much more useful than the quadratic equation. In fact, if you do the same question routine, how many people have used some statistics and probability in the last 10 years, or even in the last month? The hands stay up. You can't get away from it. It's not just math, it's any discipline. Let's take history. I know something about, and you know something about, the story of various periods of history. And in the most straightforward history classes, that's what we learn. We learn the story of what happened, what caused this, what caused that, how did A lead to B. That's nice. It's good to have a lot of knowledge about that. But how often does one find it useful to plug in a narrative over 10 or 20 or 30 years to making sense of today's world, or even making sense of another historical period?
Okay, enough of my sermon. By the way, I don't do that. I'm not going to do that very often in the class. There are no lectures in this class. There are stories that I'm going to be communicating, and there is information, notes and that kind of thing that I'm going to provide for you, but I won't be presenting them on any kind of a screen. And that brings me to the last part of this introduction video, and that is, how does this class operate? Well, you're going to go to the website every week, or probably multiple times a week, and on every Monday I'm going to be putting a new homepage up that is going to present an overview of what's being assigned for that week. And I measure your experiences weekly. So you'll be introduced to something on Monday, and it will be due by the next Monday. And so that's just how I have chosen to kind of structure this. Within that week, you'll be making something, you'll be creating something, you'll be communicating what you created to me, and you'll do that because you're going to create a website in the first week, and everything that you do for the class is going to be posted within that website. So that is a really important creative element that is also used to help you communicate with me and also with the other students, because once you make a website, it becomes available for anybody that you allow to have access to. And we'll start the class by having it accessible to everybody. I mean, everybody in the whole world who has access to the internet will be able to access your stuff. So who knows, maybe some famous people who you admire and respect will access your stuff. I don't know, but that's how that's going to operate. I have most of the projects are worth 10 points each, and you're allowed to drop one of those projects. So the lowest score, no matter what it is going to be dropped in that category. There are a couple of projects that are bigger than that, and those are mandatory for everybody. But there are other projects that, well, most of them are 10 points. You can drop one. What that means is that you don't, if you're going to be late with a project, you don't need to contact me, because you just have to make it available. And if I don't get to it or grade it at the end of the first week, then that could be your 0. There'll be a 0 in the grade book. So just move on and make sure that you complete the next project. Also, in the middle of class, after 8 weeks, if you have anything late that you haven't created yet, you can't. There's no going back and submitting anything after that for anything that precedes that. And that is really important. The people who don't succeed in this class are the ones who just consistently don't finish anything. So you just have to keep up with it. You have to keep up with it. And if you're wondering, well, can I do something late and then you'll grade it later after the week? And I'm going to say right now, it completely depends. And that's only, it will depend on whether or not you do communicate with me about individual issues. So we'll just play that part by ear. But again, after week 8, nothing before week 8 can be submitted. And again, I have these tight deadlines because we have got to keep up, got to keep doing things. And that's it. So I look forward to working with you this semester, and if you have any questions about the course or any questions within the course or throughout the course, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Again, this is a distance class, and I'm available via Zoom or on the phone. As you have learned, we're using an external website because I'm asking you to create a website for all your work. I'm creating an external website to try to make it easier to access resources outside of the very narrow learning management program that other distance learning classes use at Radford University. That's D2L. We will use D2L because that's where the gradebook is, and that's where you're going to be reviewing your progress and reading some feedback from me with all the project rubrics and stuff. Also, there's one quiz this semester that's going to be delivered in D2L. It's short, and it's just you can consider it another one of the projects, which and hopefully it encourages you to review some of the important course notes. So you'll learn more about that as the semester progresses. So anyway, again, let me know if you have any issues, and I look forward to working with you this semester.